good, guys? Welcome back to the Milk Carton Series. I'm your host, Stephanie, if you are new. And as always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Today's story is another sad story like all the others. But this story really touched me because I seen a headline floating around on Yahoo. And I think the title was about two men basically getting off of a crime from death row, pretty much. Like there was new DNA evidence that came out that stated that they were not the killers of an 11-year-old girl by the name of Sabrina Buie. And so I wanted to know more about who Sabrina was, what happened to Sabrina. You start going down that effect of, who, what, when, where, and why. And so I found out who Sabrina was, and Sabrina was a typical 11-year-old girl. She was happy, bright. And so on September 25th, 1983, Sabrina went to the store to get her mother something. And while she was there, I had read an article that someone did see Sabrina and, she was playing with the little ping pong machine. You know how those machines used to be in the stores. I know when I was little, I would see them all the time. Like, hey, can I get some quarters to go play them? And so that was the last time anyone had ever seen Sabrina. So her body ended up turning up in a cornfield. She was completely naked, and it had been stated that she was raped and she died of, asphyxiation. And her underwear were in her mouth. All of this happened in Red Spring, North Carolina. So it had been stated that there was a rumor that went around when police officers went to figure out more about Sabrina. So they had found out that a girl basically stated that Henry McLockham, who was 19 years old at the time, he came to visit his brother. 15-year-old Leon Brown. And so many people basically said that he was like very weird. He was very suspicious. But what they really didn't know is that Henry suffered from like intellectual disability. So like he had the IQ of a 9-year-old. So although he was a grown man, he had the mental capacity for someone who was like my son's age, not really coherent with everything that is happening, especially at 19 years of age. So when police officers went to talk to him, he went to talk to them because, again,
he asked me, he said, where was you at when this girl was killed and all that? I said, well, I was home. He said, well, that's not what we heard. He said, matter of fact, your name came up in this investigation. I said, what? He said, yeah. I said, well, who told you my name, right? He said, none of your black vendors, right? And so, man, who in the world brought my name up? And he said, do you know this little girl? I said, no, I don't know her.
You didn't commit a crime. You're gonna go talk. You're gonna go figure out what's going on. But really, when you don't have the mental capacity to handle things that law enforcement are going to ask you, it's kind of a downer for him, because he really needs someone to know. He really needs someone there to know what exactly they're talking about, someone that can actually talk to someone with that type of, disability. So pretty much he was in this room for 5 hours being drilled, and Henry decides that he's going to confess to this crime. But it had been stated later that they basically kind of coerced him into this. They basically put it in his mind that he did this crime. And it instantly brought me back to that movie that was on Netflix about the 5 guys, where police officers drilled them without a parent, basically, putting things in their head. And I can only imagine, 1983, can only imagine. So Henry, he decides to put other key players into the death and murder of Sabrina. He puts his 15-year-old brother into play, Leon. And so Leon and his mother were already at the police station, and they begin to question him.
He said, do you know any of her family or anybody? I said, no, I don't know none of the people down here. I'm down here on a visit my mother for the summer. And then he said, well, this guy told us that you was there at the scene of crime when this girl got killed. I said, no, he told me you a lie. I wasn't at no scene of crime. I was home where I belong. I got proof that I was home. So he started pointing his finger in my face. Then I was like sitting in a chair. He got off in my face, hollering at me. That kind of shook me. It scared me up a little bit. Because I had never been in no police station before being questioned by police. Then he told me, you know you killed that girl. You know you killed that girl. I said, man, I ain't killed nobody, man. I ain't seen that girl that night. And he said, when I come back in here, you better tell me the truth and all that, right? I said, I told you the truth where I was that night. He said, no, you told me you was at home. I said, that was where I was, at home. I wasn't out on 12:30 at night.
And what's sad about it is because Henry signed this written statement. He didn't really know what was being stated on the document, but he signed it. And so that hindered him in this process. And it would hinder him for many, many of years because, one, you confess to a crime. So automatically a jury is going to convict you on that, especially back in 1983. What sucks is they had said that Leon also had like some learning disabilities as well. So when he went in the room, he just signed the document because he couldn't read it.
I say he came back in like 5 minutes later. I had made up my mind, right? Because I had never been under this much pressure of a person howling at me, threatening me, and all that crazy stuff. So what I did, I gave them false names and made up a story. This is the way the crime happened when the crime didn't really happen that way and all that, right? Because I was trying to go home. I gave a false confession. I had me growing up. I used to make stories up, like living in a fantasy world, something like that. And I would make stories and make them seem real and all that. And that's what I made that story up that night, where how the crime supposed to be when really it wasn't a crime there at all. I was scared of the people at that police station that night. And I was high and everything, I was frightened and everything. So they told me if I didn't tell them the truth, that something bad was gonna happen to me and all that. Hey, I just made up a false story so they could let me go home. I just made up a story and gave it to them because they said they'd let me go home. My mind was focused on getting out of that.
So when they began to recontract what they stated, it was too late. At this point in 1984, they were convicted of the murder and death of Sabrina Buie, the rape and murder of Sabrina Buie, and they were sentenced to death. But in 1991, they were granted a new trial. But when this new trial went on, Leon was actually, his sentence was reduced to life in prison, but Henry was still with the death penalty. And the main key thing in this was that signed document because of their confession, which truly hindered them. And this case kind of became very notorious back in this time frame. And being as though that a lot of people were pro capital punishment, they kind of used these two, young men, guys, as an example, putting on flyers. And I did read an article about Sabrina's family stating that, they were upset that these two men were released from prison. But Henry, he had wrote to the commissioner of North Carolina to, basically hear him out to his case. Well, he didn't write it, but he, Later, Leon wrote to the North Carolina innocence people, and they began to take on this case. And when this Innocence Project took on this case, they were so baffled at what evidence that was there. Because although these two guys basically confess, you know what I mean, the evidence didn't support their confession, because there were fingerprints that they found that did not match Henry or Leon, as well as no DNA evidence at the crime scene matching them at all. And it had been stated that they did not compare the fingerprints to other cases, because before Sabrina died, there was another young lady who was killed in a similar way. And so there had been a person who was found guilty of the murder of that young lady by the name of Roscoe Artis. And like I said previously, the girl lady, she was basically killed the same way as Sabrina. So there had been other key evidence that was not tested. And when they did go and test it, the DNA did match Roscoe Artis. So in 2014, they were released from prison. And then in 2015, the governor of North Carolina basically granted them full pardon of their innocence. And it's a sad story because lives were broken. And I don't know what made them, confess. But again, different times. And again, if you have the IQ of a 9-year-old, you're not really very sure of what is going to transpire. And it's sad because many people, this happens to many people who don't, have the proper lawyers, proper litigations to help them. And it sucks, and I feel bad for Sabrina's family because, here it is, you're thinking that these two men did it, and 9 times out of 10, they probably didn't do it. And I can only imagine how that feels. And I say that too because he's in prison for life, but he wasn't charged as of yet for the murder of Sabrina. So I can only imagine how that feels, you go through this process thinking that you have the right people, and then it comes out that there's new DNA evidence that results to someone else. Yeah, just a sad story, like so sad. Lives are ruined, and this is one of them things where it's like, oh man, people are so cruel. People are cruel. Like, people just do the most for me. But I really wanted to share that story. It sucks all around the border. 2 people lost their lives in the system. Sabrina lost her life in a brutal way. And then you have a man who pretty much committed the same crime a month earlier and literally got off.